Yeah. Well, this is going to be a little. The people.
Yeah. Hello, everyone. Can you guys hear us over Zoom? Does this sound okay?
Yes.
Okay. We'll begin in just a minute. I see them all. Do you want, it looks like all of the HRB members are online now. Do you want to begin? Are you ready?
Recording in progress.
All right, we're ready. Ready?
I'll let you know once we're unmuted.
Okay. Kids, we're starting. You ready? Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. I will call to order the Monday, February 14th, 2022 meeting of the Oregon City Planning Commission. First item on the agenda, election of Planning Commission Chair and Vice Chair. I'll first ask for if we have any nominations for Chair.
I'd like to make a nomination for Dirk Schlagenhofer to be chair for the upcoming year.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have a first and a second. Do we have any other nominations? Okay, we call a vote.
Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Gage?
Aye.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Aye.
And Chair Schlagenhofer.
Aye. Well, thank you. We can't hear you.
Oh, sure. Here, I'll take my mask down. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. Nominations for Vice Chair.
I nominate Mike Mitchell.
Okay. We have a second? Second. Okay. Nomination by Patty Gage and a second by, I believe it was Commissioner Stoll. Any other nominations? Okay. Call the vote.
Commissioner Stoll?
Aye.
Commissioner Staggs?
Aye.
Commissioner Mitchell?
Aye.
Commissioner West?
Aye.
Commissioner Gage?
Aye.
Commissioner LaSalle?
Aye.
And Chair Schlagenhofer.
Aye. All right. Okay, I guess I don't have to move. Public comment. Do we have any public comments on items not on the agenda? Okay. All right, legal training. First item on the agenda. How are we going to do this?
I'm Carrie Richter, Deputy City Attorney. I'm going to present a few slides, talk through a few things, hopefully in 30 minutes, and then turn it over to you and HRB members to ask questions and, do a little stump the chump here for Valentine's Day, and hopefully have a robust discussion, not about any matters that are actively before either the Planning Commission or the HRB, but certainly past activities are, your past experiences are germane, and I want to give you all an opportunity to ask me or ask each other anything about land use procedures. So this is a joint meeting between Planning Commission and Historic Review Board. It's going to be hard for me to remember. I've got the HRB on Zoom and you all here, so I'll try to speak to both of you. I know most of you have been through this before, and I know Planning Commissioner LaSalle, welcome. You are well-heeled in this arena, so I know you know many things, and I'm going to try to tell you all something maybe you didn't know or hadn't thought of before. So hopefully there'll be something in this for everyone. So happy Valentine's Day, everyone. Thank you for coming out. I know there are other things you could be doing with your time right now, so I appreciate it. Let's get started by me moving the slide. Okay. So Oregon's land use planning framework, you probably already know that there are different regulations that control how Oregon City Planning Commission and Historic Review Board function. Those regulations have their origins in multiple places. Some of those places are federal. The U.S. Constitution, you all probably know about the Takings Clause that protects private property. You know about, there's some religious exemptions. There's free speech that affects how we regulate signs in the city. There are a series of laws, Fair Housing Act, and Americans with Disabilities Act. And there's a whole bunch of laws that have been incorporated into the city's land use regulations. We find roots in our regulations from state regulations. The Oregon Revised Statutes are the laws that are adopted by the Oregon legislature. Those set forth the procedures that govern how we evaluate land use applications, and they are very specific, very prescriptive, more prescriptive than any other statewide land use system in the nation. So the disclosures that Chair Blythe and Chair Schlagenhofer have to read, those are set forth in state law. I didn't make them up to be that boring. They come straight from the legislature that way. So there are rules about how fast we have to make decisions. There are rules about when we have to have continuances. There are rules. So those are all set forth in state law, and Oregon City has to follow them. There are special laws that protect particular types of applications. For example, housing laws. There are specific rules about how the city must process applications with respect to housing. There are other sort of protected areas that the laws specify substantive standards. Farmland protection is one, industrial land protection. These are all specific laws that deal with that category of use. And then we have administrative rules. There is a state agency called the Land Conservation and Development Commission that is charged with promulgating land use rules. And the most popular or most known land use rules that the Land Conservation and Development Commission promulgates are the statewide land use goals. There are 19 of them. And each local government, cities and counties, have to implement those goals. And they are broad policy-related statements. For example, there's a livability goal that talks about protecting natural resources and historic preservation and aggregate resources and wetlands, and that is goal 5. And how a local government goes about protecting those resources has some flexibility, but every local government must address that livability goal. Metro has rules that the city has to implement. Most of those relate to the urban growth boundary. And Metro has the Urban Growth Management Functional Plan that specifies how local governments must plan to urbanize lands when they are added to the urban growth boundary. And so the city's annexation rules and concept planning rules all are implemented as a result of Metro's Urban Growth Management Functional Plan. And then the city has regulations, and these are the bread and butter of what the Historic Review Board and Planning Commission evaluate when they review applications. And these take the form of the comprehensive plan and map, and the Oregon City Municipal Code and zoning map. And those are 4 discrete documents. 2 are maps, 2 are narrative-based codes, and they achieve sort of different things. And the comprehensive plan, the map, and the plan policy itself, plan document itself, is the city's long-range planning document. So this is how it wants to grow, change, be different over a long-range planning horizon, 30 years usually. And that's what OC 2040 is all about, adopting a new long-range vision for how the city wants to look, how the city wants to plan for its future. And so it includes, I said the statewide land use goals are sort of these broad policy statements. That's the sort of same idea for the comprehensive plan. It is these ambitious goals for how the city wants to grow. And so it is premised on inventory work, some of which is going to be done as part of OC 2040. For example, the housing needs analysis is inventory work that is based on Portland State University puts out population projections for how much they think the city will grow over the planning horizon, the 30-year horizon. So we know how many people the city is going to have to accommodate. The city did a housing needs analysis to count how many units it has and how many units it will need to accommodate that population projection. That's what the housing inventory documentation is about. So then when the city adopts a new comprehensive plan map, the existing comprehensive plan map is in the right image there, it knows exactly what comprehensive plan designation it needs to implement in order to meet the city's population growth, projected growth. We do that for jobs. We do that for industrial land. I don't know if the city is going to update the industrial lands inventory as part of comprehensive of OC 2040, but it could. The city has inventories of historic resources. The city has, over time, updated its inventories with respect to Kanema Historic District and McLaughlin Historic District, Conservation District. And as a result of those new inventories, as time moves forward, there are more things that qualify for potential designation as historic. And so we want to inventory those items so we're protecting them in a way that furthers the city's comprehensive plan. So component parts of the comprehensive plan are not just that narrative document that identifies the goals, the ambitious policies we want to achieve, but also the concept plans. So Thimble Creek concept plan, Park Place concept plan, South End concept plan, those are all part of the city's comprehensive plan. And then the city has utility master plans, sewer master plan, stormwater master plan, water master plan, and what comes up a lot for planning commission is transportation system plan. And the city adopts these plans based on, again, we know what the population is, expected population growth will be. We know how many housing units we're going to need. We know sort of where those are going to be. So we know what size roads we need to plan to build. We know what types of intersections we are going to need to accommodate that growth. If we're going to put a new commercial area somewhere, we know we're going to need a different type of road for commercial areas or office areas or residential areas. And so we have to size our roads to accommodate that growth. We have to, the transportation system plan doesn't just include vehicles. It must include pedestrians. It must include bicycles. It also contemplates capital improvements that the city is going to have to make over time as growth occurs, because the city can't afford to just fund improvements as soon as the plan is adopted, right? It has to be incremental. And that works the same for the utility master plans as well. So this is all bundled together under the umbrella of the comprehensive plan. And the way it works is once the comprehensive plan is adopted, the city will send its comprehensive plan to LCDC, the Land Conservation and Development Commission in Salem, and they will acknowledge it. And what that means is they will determine that it complies with the statewide land use goals. In other words, the city becomes acknowledged with respect to complying with the state rules. And once that happens, then the city does not have to consider the statewide planning goals when it is reviewing an application for development that otherwise complies with zoning. So that process is known as acknowledgement. And that is what sort of, if we look at, so we've got the high level statewide planning goals that apply when we're making legislative decisions. So we're going to adopt this OC 2040 plan and we're going to evaluate it for compliance with the statewide land use goals. In other words, we're going to have enough industrial land to satisfy goal 9. We're going to have enough transportation infrastructure to satisfy goal 12. And so we're going to do that. And once we do that, LCDC will say, you're acknowledged, the goals fall away, then we have the comprehensive plan, and we are functioning under the comprehensive plan. But if we change the comprehensive plan, let's say we were to amend it to make some industrial land residential land, then we have to go back and revisit those statewide land use goals to make sure we're still in compliance. So we do that acknowledgement dance every time we amend our comprehensive plan or our comprehensive plan map. Kind of going fast? Going too fast?
Right.
Okay. All right. So the other thing that once we've adopted the OC 2040 plan, we will have to then conform the zoning, right? Presumably, what will come out of OC 2040 is a determination that we need more residential land here, we need higher density there, we need commercial somewhere else. And that will require us to then amend our zoning map to implement the comprehensive plan. So again, once we do that, we send that, we review that. Once we do that, we send that to LCDC. And once LCDC acknowledges it, then the plan doesn't apply. And just the zoning code applies unless we're doing something that requires an amendment of the zoning code, or unless the zoning code has a criterion that requires us to apply the plan. So when we're doing site plan design review, we don't apply the plan as a criterion because we've already implemented the plan in the zoning code. But if we're doing a conditional use review where we're evaluating something that may be a little bit inconsistent with or not squarely within what the zone contemplates, we might look back at the comprehensive plan and would have a criteria accordingly. Okay, moving forward to...
I have a quick question.
Please.
So if we make the plan too broad, then we can still tighten it up with zoning. If we make it too tight, then we can't. Then we're limiting our options. So what's the real drawback to having a comprehensive plan that's too broad?
There are pros and cons to both, just as you said. If you have a comprehensive plan that is too broad, then when you have to apply it, when you're making decisions on conditional use permits or making decisions on zone changes, say somebody wants to change a particular property to a specific use, and you have to go back and analyze those plan policies, if they're too loosey-goosey, then you don't have any guidance for what the long-term plan was for that particular area.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay, so This slide has a lot of text, but it lays out the various roles and responsibilities for participants in a land use review process. And I was reminded of the Shakespeare quote, the whole world's a stage and every actor plays his part. But then I went back and looked up that quote, and it says every man plays multiple parts. And I thought, this quote doesn't work for me at all, because what's really important about this chart is that everybody's got a job to do, and they don't do more than one job, right? If everybody stays in their lane, the system will work. But the system kind of breaks down when we get loosey-goosey with every man playing every part, right? Or woman. So every person. So quickly, I don't want to belabor the point because I know you all understand this, but we've got an applicant, right? And in 99.9% of the cases, the applicant bears the burden of showing the criteria are satisfied. So it is their job to come with an application that shows an evaluation of the criteria. And they do that. They identify the criteria they think apply, and they explain why their proposal satisfies those criteria. That application gets filed with the planning staff, and the planning department, with conjunction with, development services staff. Had that one wrong there, didn't I? And they work in conjunction with Public Works, Development Services.
Planning.
Okay, Planning and Development Services, pardon me. Their job is to evaluate the application and provide the sort of first pass at identifying the criteria that apply and evaluating whether an applicant has met their burden of showing that the standards are satisfied. And land use planners operate consistent with the nationwide code of ethics. And I have historically included a slide that outlines what that code is, but I didn't tonight just out of an interest of moving things along. But I want to point out that this AICP code of ethics obligates planners. All of the planners in the planning department today are AICP certified, and they are charged with contributing to the knowledge and techniques that respond to community problems in a fair and professional manner. They are charged with diligent, creative, and competent performance of the work that they do. And they have an overall responsibility to the public to always be conscious of the rights of others by expanding opportunity and providing clear and accurate information to affected persons and decision makers. And so they are professionally charged with these obligations, and they do that by reviewing the code and applying it as consistently and as properly as they can. But codes are often not as clear as they can be or should be, or we may want them to be, and that is where you all come in, charged with interpreting discretionary criteria to make the final call on what is the appropriate standard with respect to a particular application. So that is the planning staff's job. They are to interface with the public, and they are to help applicants and any participant along in the process. Neighborhood groups and others. And this is sort of the basket of sort of public participants who come to be involved in both policymaking and application review tasks that are before you. And these folks are entitled to notice, and they are entitled to an opportunity to participate, and they are entitled to consistent approval. They're entitled to consistent procedures, and they are entitled to an opportunity to participate in the process, both orally and in writing. And then your job as the decision makers are to interpret and apply the plan and regulations. And you do that both in terms of, like I said, legislative decision-making, where you make policy, as you will with OC 2040, and applying standards, as you do with quasi-judicial review, which is an application for you for a particular development. So you all probably understand this already. There are 5 types of reviews in Oregon City. Type 1 reviews are administrative. These are ones that you never see because they are clear and objective, meaning they are quantifiable determinations that are made over the counter by staff. For example, when somebody brings a building permit application to build a house, the planning staff looks at the setback to make sure that they're satisfied. They just look at the plans and say, yes, this is 5 feet, or yes, this is 10 feet, or yes, this building is 35 feet tall. And that is a type 1 review. There is no notice and there is no opportunity for comment. Type 2 reviews are more limited discretionary decision-making. These are some site plan design reviews and land divisions. Land divisions are the big type 2 reviews where there is a more limited participation structure, where there is notice to a limited area of neighbors. And they are given an opportunity to comment, a period in which they submit written testimony. And then if they are unhappy by the development director's decision, then planning director's decision, then there is an appeal right to the planning commission and then on to the city commission. Type 3 decisions are the bread and butter of what you all will see. You know what? Type 2s don't go to the planning commission, do they? They go directly to city commission. I misspoke there. I apologize. But type 3 decisions are the ones that you will see. And those are the ones that, those are discretionary review. And they include notice, and they include a public hearing by the planning commission or historic review board and an appeal to the city commission. These decisions, I should have noted in the slide, have to be made within 120 days after an application being deemed complete. And that completeness review happens at a staff level long before it gets to you. And so the important part about that is that is a statutory obligation that local governments have. We cannot take longer. That is, the legislature guarantees that applicants will have timely review. So we have to honor that and work within it. Yeah.
Does that 120-day rule include both the planning and city commission?
Yes. It is from the time an application is deemed complete, which under state law can vary, but it's about 30 to 45 days after an application is filed. It can take much longer if an applicant wants it to, but that's about how long it takes. What happens is the planning department sends a letter to an applicant and says, your application is deemed complete, and that starts the clock. And it's 120 days that the city has to take what's called make a final decision. That final decision is not just a decision by the city commission, but also it being mailed to, that notice of decision being mailed to affected parties. Wes?
This 120-day clock can be extended, though, if an applicant asked, or if or I should say, how can it be extended? From an applicant, planning commission, staff, all of the above?
Only the applicant can extend the 120-day period.
Okay.
That 120-day period can be extended for a specified duration or it can be waived entirely, meaning it doesn't apply. But it has to be, that extension has to be provided in writing. So ordinarily what happens if an applicant at a hearing says, I will extend the 120-day period until this date, staff usually follows up with that party by email to make sure we have it in writing. And it is totally controlled by an applicant. So they can refuse, in which case we have to proceed.
Commissioner Stoll.
Does the 120 days include the appeal to the city commission?
It
does. And is it 2 weeks after, what's the appeal period?
I want to say it is, I think the appeal period is 14 days after the planning commission takes final action, but then the city has to give, I think, 21 days notice of the appeal hearing after it gets an appeal. So there's like a 35-day really period, assuming that the city commission meeting happens on the 45th day.
Right.
Which, never works out that way.
Okay, one quick question, and then I think, actually, go ahead, Mike. Commissioner Mitchell.
Is this a time to talk about continuances and
Yes,
how?
sure.
Okay.
Sure, this is as good a time as any, yeah.
Who can request a continuance? Do they have to provide grounds? Can we say no? How many continuances can be requested? I think that's my question.
Continuance are specified by state law, and any party is entitled to a continuance at the initial hearing. The initial hearing is the first one that the Planning Commission or HRB has. Anyone can ask for a continuance and it must be granted. After that initial continuance, there is no right to a continuance unless new information, new evidence is submitted at that continued hearing such that other folks are entitled to respond. So I'm an applicant and I come to the continued hearing with a new geologic hazard study. And I submitted at the hearing. Nobody in the audience has had an opportunity to review it. So we have to give the audience an opportunity to review it by continuing the hearing. That's how that would work. But if the geologic hazard study that I, as the applicant, I submit it the day before the hearing. And Aquila emails it out it attaches it and reposts it to the agenda so that folks are aware that it has been submitted. Then there may not be a right to a continuance. As a matter of law, may be within the discretion of the Planning Commission to grant a continuance if the commission would like additional time, but nobody's entitled.
So what if we're in a hearing and say we've had a couple of things that night and we run up against the time limit and have to stop and come back? Is that then considered an additional hearing where if there's new evidence, someone could request a continuance again? Or is it, is there like the clock stops and we'll start the clock again, but it's still one hearing? And maybe I'm too far in the weeds. I don't know.
I think that the answer to your question is that, let's say that you run out of time at 10 o'clock and you never take up the matter. We never even get to it. In that case, there would not have been the initial hearing. And when we take it up at the next meeting, the initial hearing is that hearing. But let's say you do take it up and the applicant requested a continuance, right? So you never considered it on the merit because the applicant requested a continuance. That would legally be the initial hearing. even though there wasn't any substantive testimony on it. We tried historically to treat those sort of continued hearings where we are having a second hearing from a continuance where something wasn't considered on the merits, to treat that as the initial hearing, but we wouldn't have to as a legal matter.
Thank you.
Okay, I had a quick question. What is the ultimate limit for extensions?
It's complicated, but it's a year.
A year?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That was it, thank you.
Okay, so type 4 decisions are plan amendments and zone changes. Those are where a property owner comes and asks for the planning commission to change the designation on a particular piece of property. So those are the type 4 quasi-judicial hearing reviews. These types of reviews are fact-specific to a particular discrete one property or two properties and require the decision maker to apply the existing laws to the facts presented. This is distinguishable by legislative decisions. Legislative decisions are where the Planning Commission, Historic Review Board are asked to make policy. And making policy for the city requires broader discretion and greater flexibility. These types of decisions are where you're asked to adopt a new comprehensive plan, where you're asked to change a designation for a large annexation area. These are legislative decisions. They are not subject to the 120-day decision-making rule. You all know we just talked about much of these elements. Right to a continuance. An applicant has a right to rebuttal, so they have a right to that final oral explanation argument. After the record closes, then the Planning Commission Historic Review Board deliberates to a decision. Oftentimes that's a tentative decision because material has come out during the hearing that needs to be reflected in the findings. And so we need to give staff time to revise the decision. And so we come back for a blessing from the Planning Commission or Historic Review Board that what staff has done correctly implements your decision. I point that out because that adds to the time, right? This adds to the time that it takes for the Planning Commission and HRB to make a decision. So this is why we need to move things through or secure extensions to the 120-day clock when we can't move things through so that we don't run up against the 120-day limit. Yeah.
Sorry. Are we reasonably close to what other cities do as far as those type 1 to 4 and how
Yes.
they're handled?
Yes. The numbers are sometimes different. I mean, how they get numbered are sometimes different, but yes.
Okay. The reason I ask, and I'm okay talking about something that's already happened, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So we had a type 3 come before the Planning Commission, and we had the public hearing on that on a small parking lot. Later on, over 100, I think, unit condo complex that became quite controversial in the eyes of the neighbors was a type 2. And I'm having a hard time in terms of impact to the community and the neighbors that something as large as a condo development can be a type 2 while a parking lot was a type 3.
So those determinations are specified in the code. And ordinarily, we specify by use and not by size, which may get to what happened there. But there are also the things that are type 2 largely because it's specified in state law. For example, land divisions have to be processed as type 2. We can't process them as type 3. They are a special type of review that is the city's equivalent of a type 2. So I think that as part of implementing OC 2040, there'll be an opportunity for you to revisit those types of questions, because I think that that is a legitimate concern for sure. Commissioner LaSalle.
Can anybody or what group could request that a type 2 be changed to a type 3 and a type 3 to a type 4?
Folks can request it, but the code determines it. Okay, so it may be that staff has incorrectly categorized a use, but short of that, the code specifies it. It's not a question of, we think this is really impactful, so we want it to be a type 3. That's not discretion that the city has.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, one more here. I think it was Commissioner Mitchell that said something about an extension. So is an extension different than a continuance?
I look at it as an extension to the 120-day rule, right? That to me is how I think of an extension. A continuance is a formal, and we're going to move this proceeding on to the next and take it up at the next public hearing.
Okay.
But each public hearing is a discrete public hearing. Even though the application's review is continuing on, each public hearing is discrete.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, impartial tribunal, and I want to spend, we're at 7:44 right now, so I'm going to spend the last of my time here, and I will distribute the slides and we can talk about them, but this is really important that you all understand, because applicants are entitled to an impartial tribunal. That is something that is specified in state law, that they are guaranteed. And so you sit as both a citizen of Oregon City who knows things about the city, and rightfully so, but may have to put those aside in order to serve as a unbiased, impartial decision maker, evaluating an application strictly against the code and not based on your personal view of an applicant or its representatives or a neighborhood. Your job is strictly to weigh an application based on what is proposed against the code that has been adopted. So I want to talk about quickly the three sort of elements of ensuring an impartial tribunal. The first one has to do with ex parte contacts, and ex parte contacts are facts that you glean from outside the public hearing or beyond the public record. So things come in writing, the application documents come in, it gets distributed by Kelly or Diliana or Christina to you. That's the record. Your decision is supposed to be based on the written testimony submitted into the public record and the oral testimony that happens during the public hearings, and nothing else. If you learn facts outside of those two areas, you have an obligation to share them in the public hearing forum so that all parties, opponents and applicant, have an opportunity to respond to them. And so that means you're not disqualified from participating if you hear facts, but your obligation is to disclose them. And those facts can take the form of multiple things. The facts can come to you because, a citizen runs into you in the grocery store and says, I think that application is wonderful because it will do X, Y, and Z for the community. I think it's terrible because it will do X, Y, and Z to the community. That is an ex parte contact that has to be disclosed at the subsequent public hearing. If you attend a neighborhood meeting where an application is discussed, you get facts that may not be in the record and that you need to disclose those facts, your participation at the next hearing. If you read a newspaper article or a blog post about an application that is before you, you have an obligation to disclose that article reading into the record. If you do a site visit, you are encouraged to go do a site visit. You are encouraged to walk around the property. You are encouraged to stand at the street corner and see how the street corner functions. But if you do that, you come to the hearing, and when Chair Blythe or Chair Schlagenhofer asks for any ex parte contacts, you say, on May 4th, I sat at this corner and I watched the traffic and I saw many cars. I saw a pedestrian who couldn't cross the street. I saw a steep slope terrain that made me wonder whether or not there might be a geologic hazard. I saw a historic building right here that was highly visible. I saw I saw that. All of those facts that are gleaned from a site visit or gleaned from a newspaper article or gleaned from a conversation have to be put in the record so that everybody has an opportunity to question you about those facts. So, and it can take the form of your own personal experience, right? I drive this intersection all the time, right? I shop at Walmart all the time. And I know how pedestrians move between parking lots and front doors. All of those sort of personal experiences that occur to you when you are preparing for a hearing need to come into the public record so that folks have an opportunity to question you about them so that we make sure we have an impartial tribunal. Any questions about ex parte contacts? Oh, newspaper and blog posts. If you read one or you receive a next door post about something, if you receive one, it's really helpful if you just forward it to staff. Then we can just put it in the record. And then it's just there and we don't have to spend time during public hearings talking about it.
Thank you.
So just email it to Juliana or Christina or Kelly and they'll just put it in the record, then everybody will know about it.
Okay.
Decisions have to be free of actual bias. Actual bias is a predisposition to a particular outcome. And there are, I think, things that we can put aside our sort of personal views about things and make a decision objectively based on the criteria. And there are things that every human being cannot. There may be some particular sign proposal or a particular application that you cannot set aside your personal views to consider, either because you live too close, you know these people personally and they're friends. There are lots of reasons why you may not be able to serve as an unbiased decision maker. And in those cases, you need to step down and not participate. And there is nothing wrong with stepping down. That's why we have so many of your smiling faces. We can afford to lose a few, right? No, I'm teasing. We can't afford to lose any of you, but we would prefer to work around that than to make you feel like you are having to make a decision that is not consistent with who you are. Okay? Finally, actual conflicts of interest. If you or any of your family member stand to gain pecuniarily, you will make money or lose money one way or another in your professional capacity or your investment capacity, or because your son mows the grass at this particular place, you will stand to lose money or gain money. Your family will, depending on how the application turns out. That is an actual conflict of interest and requires you to not participate. And in those cases, you just email staff and we can talk through it and make a decision. Any questions about impartial tribunal?
Just a quick one. It mentions family member.
Yeah.
What about best friend?
That does not count. That is not a family member.
Okay.
But perhaps your family members or your best friend's interest in this application may make you biased. Right? Okay, public meetings, really quick. Broken now. I told Lisa I wasn't going to go on and I broke it. Okay, public meetings, really quick. When a quorum of you get together and you talk about city business, that is a public meeting. And public meetings have to be recorded and minutes taken and notice provided. So try not to do that. Try not to do that. You've got such full lives that you don't need to be talking outside of the public hearing process about city business. In addition to a quorum is a majority of you. So that would be 4 of the 7. Historic Review Board would be same. I can't see you, so I'm guessing. But that is not just live, but it is also in email. So that's called a serial meeting. So if Aquila emails the agenda packet out to you all and Mike says, I can't, or Commissioner Mitchell, excuse me, says, I can't be there tonight. And he says it, sends it, or next week, and he sends it to the group. And then Commissioner Stagg says, well, I'd like to be there, but I have some issues with this and this and this. And then Commissioner Staggs emails that to the group. And then Commissioner Stoll emails Commissioner Schlagenhofer and says, you know what Commissioner Staggs was saying was right on. I really agree with that. And Commissioner Schlagenhofer emails Commissioner Gage. So all of that sort of game of telephone, even if it doesn't include all of you, can become a public meeting as soon as it hits 4 people. So be really careful with the reply all function or just reply function. If you need to ask questions, please direct them to staff and not to each other.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So if we are not deliberating on a decision and 4 of us or 5 of us decide to go somewhere together as a group to just go have lunch or something like that, is that okay, or would that
absolutely? It
become
absolutely is okay.
Okay.
4 or 5 or all of you could, well, yeah, all of you could get together and talk about OC 2040 in a general way. So long as you told staff you were going to do it, right? But there is no problem with you all talking about city business generally, so long as it is not a matter that is on the agenda for a quasi-judicial hearing.
Okay.
Right? It's the quasi-judicial hearing where there is an application and you're sitting as a judge. That is really critical. The public meeting aspect of talking about city business outside of the hearings room is we're not recording it. There's no minute, right? So you want to avoid that without conferring with staff first and making sure we do what we can to get minutes, somebody taking notes, right? So you want to do a site visit. You know, part of OC 2040 is you're going to revisit some area and you want to go out and walk around as a group. Absolutely, go do it, but confer with staff first so we can comply with the public meetings.
Okay, I'm not saying we talk to each other because we really don't talk about much outside of here, but it brings up a question. So if you've got more than a quorum and you're talking about, application, that's definitely a no-no. What if you talk to one person, discuss the whole thing, then you talk to another person, discuss things, but you do it one at a time? Is that still bad?
Once you reach 4 people, it's a public meeting.
But you can talk to 3 about it. Do you have to disclose that?
Yes, you do, because it's an ex parte contact.
Okay, all right, okay, good, thank you.
Parte, wow. Okay.
You all have OC email addresses. Please use them for all city business, because if you don't, and we get a public records request, we're coming for your laptop, and you don't want us coming for your laptop, right? It's a big hassle, and costs a lot of money, and keep Oregon City business on your Oregon City email, and your furniture shopping or my anthropology shopping habit, keep it separate. Okay, we are out of time, so I'm going to talk really, really quickly about deliberation decisions. I've talked a little bit about your obligation to interpret the applicable approval criteria. That is something that you are uniquely qualified to do, and I encourage you to do that. We have to make decisions based with adequate findings. That means explanation, and that is largely a staff job as far as I see it, in terms of putting together staff reports and decisions for your review. But we use what you say during your deliberations for the basis of those findings, for that explanation. There has to be substantial evidence. Substantial evidence is the term of art, meaning that there must be evidence that a reasonable person would believe, would rely on to make that the case. In other words, a reasonable person could rely on that fact in the record to make a decision. It is not a threshold that must be achieved in an objective way. It is whether a reasonable person could rely on that. So, when it comes to weighing the character of evidence, that weight that is given is entirely within the HRB and the Planning Commission's determination. LUBA, the body who would review a city decision, will not reweigh evidence so long as there is enough evidence to meet that reasonable person standard. Conditions of approval. Planning Commission and Historic Review Board are authorized to apply conditions of approval should they decide to do so, if necessary, to approve an application. The city's regulations do not require the city to adopt conditions of approval as opposed to denial. Some other jurisdictions do have those obligations, where there is a code section that says if you can apply conditions, you must. That code provision does not exist in Oregon City. So you have the choice. You can deny or you can approve with conditions of approval. I had included some examples of standards that are discretionary that require an interpretation, and I thought we might talk through them, but we don't have time. So I think you understand examples of discretionary approval standards. There is, with respect to conditions of approval, there is a obligation guaranteed by the Fifth Amendment that says that the city cannot impose conditions of approval that are not roughly proportional to the impacts from the development. That is what keeps cities from, quote, extorting, right, improvements or obligations in exchange for a development approval, right? you want to build a single family house and the city comes and says, okay, we'll give you permission to build a single family house, but you must build a school, right? You must build a 4-lane freeway, right? The impacts from that house would not justify a condition that was that excessive, right? So we have to be careful when we talk about conditions of approval that they are roughly proportional to the impacts of the development. I included this, this is the Land Conservation and Development Commission's list of recommendations for effective participation. And they talk about being prepared, reviewing materials in advance, and coming with your questions. Not being afraid to ask questions, but keeping focused on the approval criteria and the evidence and the record, and not straying too far down away from the discrete task at hand. They talk about not making assumptions about what you hear and asking questions of applicants and opponents to make sure you understand exactly what it is that they are testifying to, and avoiding prejudgment. So with that, questions, comments, criticisms, jokes? Commissioner Staggs. Yeah. Yep.
What state law determines, or what is the guide for that nexus? In other words, say an applicant says, that they're giving conditions of approval, and the applicant says that's unfair. Mm-hmm. What do you refer to determine whether it's fair or not?
There are some U.S. Supreme Court cases that talk about what the bounds of a proportional exaction would be. And what they have to be is what we call roughly proportional to the impacts of development. So when we're looking at 100-unit subdivision, we're looking at how many pedestrians that generates as using sidewalks, and whether those sidewalks get you to a commercial area or if they get you to the edge of the urban growth boundary, which, why do you need a sidewalk that takes you to the edge of the urban growth boundary? So it's this rough evaluation of impacts from development versus the cost of providing that benefit.
It's a little loose in terms of exactly how it.
Yeah, I mean, it's part art and part science. I think some things are easier to quantify than others. For example, water usage. We know exactly how much water a house will use. We know exactly what size pipe it takes to bring the water to that house. So we know that exactly. That's a little easier than pedestrians, for example.
Thank you.
Commissioner LaSalle. Yeah.
In our attachment was the Oregon Planning Commission Handbook.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that in great detail. Is that a legal document or just a guideline?
It's a guideline. It's put out, I think, by the League of Oregon Cities, I think, perhaps, or the Land Conservation and Development Commission. I can't remember, but it's
by the state, something or another. And so if we don't follow it, there wouldn't be any implication.
Well, I think it's just guidance. I think it's just, based on their evaluation of what works and what doesn't. This is sort of a recommendation, but it's not.
A lot of it looked to me like just common sense or fairness.
Yeah, and I think when you think about it, really, the reason we have a quasi-judicial process is to provide fairness, right, to everybody in the process.
And could you send us a copy of your presentation?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, I got something. SDCs.
Yeah.
Are those regulated by the state at all, or is it strictly every municipality and their unique situation, of how they're controlled?
System development charges are a statutory construction. They're very regimented in terms of the methodology that goes into how they are calculated and what they can include and cannot include.
Because I know our ADU SDCs are higher than other cities. They may be lower than other cities, but can applicants say, hey, yours are way higher than Milwaukee? I don't know if they are. I have no idea. But could they use that as an argument?
The city goes through a process to update its system development charges with respect to different areas periodically, and that would be the time for folks to come in and say, the ADU SDCs are higher than they are in any other city in the metro area, they should be lower, or they should be higher. But once that determination is made, it apply the rate system applies across the board and cannot be challenged until the city revisits its rate assessment, scheme. Does that make sense?
Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
What?
Yes, Commissioner West. Dalton.
And the city commission is the one who reviews the SDCs. It's not planning commission. We won't be reviewing them.
I don't know if you all get an opportunity to comment. I seem to recall that there have been presentations to the Planning Commission about various SDCs, maybe not water and sewer, but I would think the ADU one would come to you for comment, but ultimately the final decision would be the City Commission. Any Historic Review Board questions, comments?
Nothing here. Very good presentation.
They're all frozen. Oh, I know I was. Okay. Well, thank you for coming out. Thank you for your continued work on behalf of the city.
Okay.
Will anything to add?
Mr. Schlangenhofer?
Yes, Commissioner Mitchell.
I've got a suggestion or a request of staff on another training topic. It's 9 times out of 10, the first thing we hear about from the neighbors is traffic. I would love to have an evening with Mr. Replinger going, where do the ITE traffic numbers come from? Where do the traffic surveys that are required come from? What are our rights and responsibilities as a planning commission to adapt those numbers or apply those numbers to what's going on in Oregon City? And I think it would be of interest to way more than just the planning commission. I know, Commissioner LaSalle, I'm sure the CIC would love to to hear that kind of a presentation. So, whether the planning commission is the host at one of our meeting nights and we invite, CIC, the Transportation Advisory Committee, I mean, they live in that world, so they probably know all of that. But I know it would be very helpful for me, and I think it would be helpful for everybody and for the community to know more about where those numbers come from.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a great suggestion. I can talk with Mr. Riplinger. You probably know that he is planning a retirement sometime this spring. Oh, maybe you didn't know that. But so we have another consultant on board, so it might be him and our other consultant or one or the other, but I think that's a great idea, so I will talk with him.
Great, thank you.
That's an excellent idea. Were you thinking a big work session with the other?
I don't know. I just, as open-ended, a presentation from, maybe all of us could put together our questions that we had ahead of time. So whoever it is, the consultant could prepare and then take questions as they come up that night. To keep it in, informal. It's informative. It's an information session. I don't know if it's a work session exactly.
Okay.
But just, I'd love to know where those numbers come from. How often are they updated? One of the things that came up, a question that was asked the last time around was, do they make a distinction between traffic impact of a single family home in a rural area compared to a single family home in a inner city? All those different things, where do those numbers come from?
Right.
Are they kept up to date? Has COVID done anything to it? There's a world of questions.
And the thing about,
And that's why those guys make big bucks to
right.
interpret.
Well, that's the thing. If you understand exactly what the numbers mean and where they're coming from, they can make sense to that person, but they make no sense to anybody else or a select few. So we're supposed to just accept the fact that they're correct. Where I don't know if it's possible to ever, have the knowledge that the traffic consultants do, but it would be helpful if they could show us a little more about where the numbers are coming from. So I do love that suggestion. Commissioner LaSalle.
Well, it'll be a shame to lose John Replinger. I remember at one meeting sometime back, the question was put to him, how many associates do you have? And he said, I am the associate. So there, and then I have a couple of corrections to our bylaws. I don't know if tonight would be the time to do that or bring it up or not. They're typos, really. Oh.
I think I recommend get those Willa and still on the agenda.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. If there's nothing else, I think we have communications. Is there anything?
I would just like to bring up that you mark your calendars for April 12th. That's when we're planning to have the next Planning Commission and City Commission joint work session to talk again about OC 2040. So our plan is to go individually. We'll come back to your commission at our next meeting, February 28th, and present the goals and policies to you so that we can kind of get some feedback on the wording. The way we left the joint work session was get some red lines, get specific, wordsmith. I lost the word for wordsmith, but to go through kind of wordsmithing.
That was the term that was used, as I recall.
Yeah, thank you. So we'll kind of start that process individually with the Planning Commission and the City Commission, and then come back together. And I think that will make it a little more effective of a joint work session if we kind of pull both comments together in one document. So we have received one set from Commissioner Mitchell, who worked with Commissioner McGriff. So you'll see some of those wrapped together. But the point of me saying that was to mark your calendars for April 12th.
Okay. All right. Anything else anybody wanted to bring up?
It looks like Kelly Reed has her hand raised.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see that. Ms. Reed.
No worries. Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to add that the HRB will have a work session on OC 2040 next week on February 22nd. That's all.
Okay, thank you. Get their hands up that I'm missing. Okay, and we're adjourned.
Recording stopped.